Thank you, Amelia, and thank the West Virginia Education Alliance for sponsoring this Ed Talk. I think about when we were meeting several years ago, and I believe we had the head of Toyota there with me as well. It was nice to be in the same room. But this is the new world we're in, and I think there's no more appropriate topic than to talk about broadband and expanding equity and access to learning. I'm happy to be on certainly with my counterpart, Senator Manchin, and Dr. Birch and Rob Hinton. Rob and I have had many conversations about how do we deploy broadband in all aspects across West Virginia. And I think he and the Broadband Council have really, I think, made tremendous headways over the last several years. And I know that Clayton Birch has had his challenges, certainly with the new COVID world that we're living in now, and how do you deliver education. I want to be cognizant that I don't repeat a lot of what Senator Manchin has said. We have a lot of the same perspectives. One of the things that I think, obviously, when you think of broadband accessibility, you think about it of ways of growing our economy, small businesses, keeping our communities healthy, and telehealth. But, you know, to talk about the opportunities for our students to gain knowledge and the skills they need to compete in the workforce and build successful careers. I was just on a Zoom call just a minute ago, and one of the people who was on the call said that their son was going to be taking his AP course or his AP test virtually at his home. I wondered, you know, how they were going to work out, because, you know, those are tough tests and takes a lot of concentration. So that just is sort of a demonstration of what we're facing over the last several months. It's certainly, the technology is taking us much beyond what I would have imagined as the mother of 3 children coming through the schools in the 80s and 90s. I do think that when I visit classrooms and see the technology it's available, not just for a child at a computer, but the smart boards and everything that the teachers can use as tools, it's just fascinating to me to see where we can take this and how far it can go. As we look back in West Virginia, I think, you know, I'm a total optimist. Everything's, my glass is always half full, but I see where we had some very critical missed opportunities in our state, particularly in the stimulus package, where we were the state, I think, that received the greatest amount of dollars. And unfortunately, that did not achieve the desired result, which is building a backbone through West Virginia. And that is a great disappointment to me. And that's why I want to be the steward of the federal dollars here for now and into the future, where we know that when we appropriate $100 million through a Reconnect program for USDA, that it's actually getting into the desired communities and that people can connect to it. You know, if we're going to devote our federal resources to building out a network, we've got to have full access across the board to be able to let communities and providers be able to access that to provide that service. And we didn't do that under the stimulus plan, to my disappointment. So, but looking ahead, we're going to have a hearing. I'm also on appropriations, where we do a lot of appropriating through EDA, through USDA. We work with the FCC for dollars to coming into not just rural areas, but also into the country in general. We're working on 5G through our Commerce Department, our Commerce Committee. I'm on the Commerce Committee. There are many hearings where we're talking about equity of broadband service from urban and rural states. That service in New York City is fully equated to service in Ronceverte, and we should be comparing apples to apples and not saying, well, you know, of course New York City is going to get bigger, broader, better because of where they are and who can pay for it, when in reality we're disadvantaging and creating that digital divide. We're having a hearing in Commerce tomorrow on the COVID issue, and where broadband has been highlighted as lacking in some areas, but also just an incredible tool. A lot of people are teleworking, but I've talked to people on the phone who couldn't telework because they didn't have the bandwidth. We're distance learning, and we're keeping our social distances, and we're doing our telehealth. This is sort of our new normal. So as we look at what did we do and what can we learn from the distance learning that we put into effect in the CARES Act, we put in $13 million for our elementary and secondary schools to help them with their emergency relief. Dr. Birch, I've talked to some superintendents of school systems throughout the state who've used some of this money to create hotspots for their students because they didn't have the accessibility in their home. You can't go to the public library anymore. You can't go to the McDonald's and sit in McDonald's or wherever. So creating hotspots so that students could have that deliverable education close to their home or in their home. And then the governor received also $3 billion in an emergency education relief package. The FCC has been very supportive of this. We've had the chairman in more than once, Chairman Pai. We had him actually over to Hardy Telecom, and we also had him, we went right next door to Hampshire County just to show you the contrast of who's got deliverable rural service and who doesn't. We've also had the other FCC commissioner in to talk to us about telehealth. We went down to Boone Memorial and over to CAMC to talk about that. We know that our E-rate does help our schools and our school districts have affordable broadband. One of the big questions I've had about the E-rate dollars, in my view, and we've tried to figure out, Rob's tried to help us on this, why can we not take the deliverable of the broadband into the school and then use that as sort of our pod to go out to the areas, the more remote areas? Because obviously the children are going to school, into that school. Why can't we use that? And there's always some bureaucratic reason why we're not doing that. But we are really trying to work with our different entities to try to make sure that we maximize the ability of the E-rate program. We've just relaxed, the FCC just relaxed or actually waived the E-rate program rule, which would allow schools and libraries to accept improved capacity Wi-Fi hotspots from other people. So that, I think, will be a big plus as we try to move to connect every single student who comes from that school. The school systems have worked really hard to get devices into high school and middle school and even into the elementary school. But if they can't take it home with them and do their homework or do their research projects, they're behind. They're behind in school. They're behind with their friends. And I think it has not just an educational aspect to it, but probably the whole child aspect to it of really being kind of out of it and not having that best available information. I created a program called Capito Connect, and I've launched it as I became a senator. It's had some great successes so far, I think. The strategy is to make sure we knew what we had, and then the strategy is to secure additional resources. We've been able to, we had a huge hit, I think, in the USDA Reconnect program for Harrison, Doddridge, Lewis, Barber, Upshur, Tyler. It was over $20 million. And this is a rural co-op that's partnering with a business or with a provider to go out to their rural co-op customers, thousands of people, to offer broadband. And so we're excited about that. I've also worked with Facebook and Zayo to ask that they're coming through West Virginia. Let us use your lines, your trunk lines, so that we can get our municipalities together, that we can get our providers together to use that huge backbone that we need to deliver the service. So the last thing I would say is I do agree absolutely with Joe on, or Senator Manchin on the mapping issue. That is an enormous issue. We just did a bill on that would have, it's called shape files. It goes all the way, not from the census tract, it goes to individual houses, so that the FCC is going to have the information that shows individual residents that have and do not have service. Right now, it's sort of done more regionally, and that determines where the dollars go. So with that, I said, I think I was quoted in the, I don't know, Wall Street Journal, I think, when we were talking about broadband in light of the COVID phenomenon that we see. And I'm not normally somebody who gets really aggressive with my language, but I said, it's just taking too damn long. And that's what I feel about when we talk about educating our children, making sure they have every tool available to them in their home. So I thank you for letting me participate in this Ed Talk, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you and my counterparts on the call to make West Virginia connected, modernized, highest ability of technology to bring that education to every single child in our state.
Thank you, Senator Capito, for touching on so many important layers in this issue of broadband. Our first question today asks, are there any upcoming initiatives that will address the cost factor that prevents families from actually having broadband access in their homes?
Well, there are certain programs, like I know like AT&T and others providers do provide a low or reduced availability of broadband. And some of this is subsidized by the federal government. And so that can deliver some of the broadband service to those in the lower income or mid income. But I mean, I was even talking with the president of Marshall University, who told me that 100 students had to remain on campus because they didn't have broadband availability at their home. I talked to another man whose son came home from WVU, but he didn't have all the equipment that he needed. And so it's just a very broad reaching problem, but there are programs that help those lower and middle income folks that just can't afford the service. But you have to be really careful. That's where I think the speed test comes in that Senator Manchin talks about. You got to make sure that the service you're paying for is the service that's being delivered. And that's been a real problem throughout the state.
Thank you so much. The second question is, how did the relaxed FCC ruling help hotspots?
Well, I think, we're looking at every technology that's available. And so with our terrain, we have some particular challenges, which we know. So I think the FCC ruling allows for the E-rate hotspot availability for education purposes. And I think I think you see our superintendents throughout the school systems taking advantage of that.
Great, thank you so much. And our last question for Senator Capito is, what are you doing to ensure Frontier offers quality internet service amidst its bankruptcy troubles?
Well, for those of you on the line, I've had my issues with Frontier. I've been pretty public with that and certainly have had them into my office more than a few times on several issues. I am concerned, as they're in bankruptcy, that we maintain that they maintain the service and the service at the levels of which they're charging. And we've had this conversation, and I've been assured that they are going to do it. But I tell you one thing, if you want to call my office and have us, if you're having trouble with Frontier, we've done a lot of casework on this. And I have my Charleston office is 304-347-5372. That's one way that we are holding Frontier accountable, not only at the higher level, but also at the ground level with service, individual service and a casework kind of scenario. So I keep pushing them and hoping that the promises that have been made would be kept. So I am concerned about that, but if it starts to fall off, you need to contact any one of us to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire.
Thank you, Senator Capito.